Hello guys, it is me, the Tank, and next year, and today I'm going to be talking about the Christie M1919/1921 tanks, which were the first tanks that Walter Christie would make, and he would become famous for his Christie suspension, which would be found famously on the BT tank and his convertible tanks. But for now, I just kind of want to talk about his first forte into the tank world, and this is ironically my first forte into the World War II tank world, so pretty exciting. Onto the backstory, World War I proved the importance and usefulness of tanks, but America didn't really have many original tank concepts. Don't get me wrong, I loved all of the American World War I tanks, but, they were either based heavily off of existing designs, the skeleton tank, for example, or literally just based off tractors. So, in the post-war age, America began investing heavily into their own tank designs, and automobile designer J. Walter Christie took to task only a year after the war. From 1918 to 1919, Christie tried to get the interest of the U.S. Ordnance Department in a lot of his gun motor carriages, which are sort of like these SPGs, which is a whole nother video, honestly. That's going back to World War I, and I gotta move on. Using his automobile experience, he created the famous Christie suspension in November 1919, and he got an Army contract to produce a new combat vehicle, which would eventually become the M1919 tank. Onto its actual statistics, the tank had 4 large road wheels, as you can see, at the extreme corners of the hull, 2 on either side, of course, with the single axle along the center section of the tank's hull with a single bogie managing a pair of small road wheels. The boxy hull had a rounded turret, which had a 57mm M1920 cannon, which, that's actually a pretty decent gun for the size, for the time. On top of that was another rounded enclosure with a .30 caliber machine gun, with the two turrets being able to turn independently of each other, though why? That seems sort of like something I would make when I'm doodling in math class. A 120 horsepower 6-cylinder engine would allow it to go 13 miles an hour with the wheeled configuration and 7 miles an hour track, because yes, you could take off the tracks and it would basically become an armored car. Christie would become famous for this convertible style. It had a 3-man crew with a commander, driver, and gunner. The vehicle was 13.5 tons, which was actually a decent amount considering the standard for an infantry tank at the time was about 7 tons. So that is twice as heavy, to be fair, which, that's a pretty hefty amount. Obviously now we have like 70-ton tanks, so. Onto trials, the vehicle was tested in the famous Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, but observers quickly criticized its lack of suspension as helical springs were becoming more common, which created a very bumpy and uncomfortable ride. Its underpowered nature led to its cross-country capability being too low for the new mechanized formations which were being planned by the Army. Further attempts were just as disappointing, but this trial, they did see some promise in it, so they gave him another design, which would become the Christie M1921. In 1922, Christie came back to the Army with a new and improved design. It added springs to the front wheel members, and also deleted the turret entirely, which was a radical, stupid change. Why? It did manage to improve performance and even the inside ergonomics, but the Army still deemed it underpowered and unreliable. It was tested until July 1924 and then given up for good. Honestly, getting rid of a turret was the main death sentence of this thing. For the final assessments, yes, this is a short video. I keep eyeing the apple toaster strudels on a plate next to me, waiting for them to cool off. Anyway, back onto final assessments. The Christie M1919 was really just an experimental design, basically for Christie to get into the tank game. It had a ridiculous turret design, not to mention poor suspension, as the Christie suspension would come across a decade longer, and it was about twice as heavy as a regular 7-ton infantry tank of the time. The M1921, I don't know why it says 24, the M1921 was better in some ways, but then it went all the way backwards to pre-FT standards by getting rid of the turret. Like, it almost had like a Chamelon type gun. These two tanks were really good in giving Christie that well-needed tank experience, but aren't good in being actual Army tanks, which is why neither were adopted. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Next time we're going to be looking at the Vickers Medium Mark 1 tank, so I will see you guys then.